All right, guys, welcome. We are just about ready to get started on Cell Roundtable 51. So here we go. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Andy Arnott
Amy Weeks.
and this is Seller Roundtable number 51. And I think Nathan, I think you're the first guest to make a reappearance. We have Nathan Hirsch here today.
Nice.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on. And you've been a busy bee. You sold your company for the big bucks. I know you can't share, but we've been. I'm pretty sure there's a red Ferrari parked in your driveway right now, and then you've decided to teach others. So that's awesome. Can't wait to see what you come up with there.
Yeah, I'm not a big car person. I was joking with someone. I really only spend money on food and travel. That's pretty much it. But yeah, kind of an interesting ending to 2019. One of our clients reached out to us and made an offer that we thought was more than fair. And yeah, I mean, we kind of wanted to make sure it was a win-win for everyone. We took $500,000 from the sale, gave it to our team in the Philippines, made sure that they were taken care of, that their jobs were secure, that their bonuses, their raises would stay in place going forward. And we did a ton of due diligence on the new owners. I love them. I look up to them. Mark Hargrove, David Martin. The FreeUp's in really good hands. I'm now a FreeUp client, which is a little bit weird, but I really like what they're doing over there, and I still recommend FreeUp. And once the transition was over, it was about 90 days transition, ended about 100 or so days ago. Now I'm focused on new things.
Yeah, speaking of those new things, you are now starting your own course, right? Teaching people how to hire virtual assistants. Tell us a little bit more about Outsource School.
Yeah, so we want it to be more than just a course. I mean, we want to build out a full education platform. It starts with our first course called Cracking the VA Code, which is for pre-sale this week at half price. But that's going to teach people the exact process that we use to build a great team of VAs. I mean, FreeUp, we did $12 million in revenue in 2019. We had no office, no US employees. It was like my business partner, Connor, and myself, and 35 full-time VAs in the Philippines. That was the whole business. So we want to teach people. I mean, we didn't just wake up one day and hire 35 people and cross our fingers and hope it worked out. We interviewed them, onboarded them, trained them. And then once we invested time, energy, and money into them, we kept them around for years. We had very little turnover. And that was by far the hardest part of selling the business, is not being able to work with them anymore, although we made sure they were taken care of. And assuming this course goes well, we have other ideas: how to use VAs to get on podcasts, how to use VAs to run your social media. And we have the same developer who built the FreeUp software working on a bunch of VA software. So it won't be Amazon specific software. And I can't share exactly what we're working on, but imagine a VA toolbox to go along with to help you manage your VAs. That'll have a lot of different features there. So a lot going on. We'll see how it all plays out.
Well, that's really, really exciting. I can't wait for your course, all of your platform, everything that's going on, because you are the guy who kind of cracked the VA code, who kind of helped everybody else hire their first virtual assistants. Maybe tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I was a longtime Amazon seller. I started Amazon in 2008, 2009. I had to be one of the first like few thousand or few 10,000 Amazon sellers out there. And there were no courses, there were no gurus. I had no idea what I was doing. And I kind of figured it out as I went along. And one of the things I figured out early on is hiring college kids where it was not very reliable back then. They were much more focused on either school or smoking or drinking or whatever it was. And it wasn't my business. So I quickly adapted and hired in the remote world out of necessity, using the Upworks and the Fivers. And I scaled my business for years doing that. And eventually I just got sick of posting a job and getting 50 people to apply and interviewing them one by one. And I wanted something better and faster. And I kept looking and looking. And when I couldn't find it, I came up with the idea of building my own platform, FreeUp. And we launched that with $5,000, a minimum viable product, a really crummy software that we just took it to market as quickly as we could. And we adjusted based on people's feedback. And we're fortunate enough to grow and partner with a lot of great people like you guys. And the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, Nathan, that's what I'm most impressed with. Like I told you the other day, I'm waiting for your partnership course because you were an absolute master at partnerships. You would reach out enough to like keep you top of mind, but not so much where I was like, oh, this Nathan guy's bugging me again. Like you've mastered that skill. So after this, that's my request for the next course. But tell me a little bit about. I know this is a little off subject. This is selfish because I want to hear about this. But like, kind of where did you come up with your the way that you approach partnerships and how to get all these partners on board?
Yeah, so let's definitely talk about that. So I don't know where I came up with it. It's more of my just overall mentality of dealing with people. I find human psychology just fascinating. I don't know about you guys, but it's really cool. And I kind of know like what bothers me. Like I'm sure you guys get pitched all the time. You guys get messaged all the time with stuff you like, stuff you didn't like. So kind of just figuring out what that is. And my whole baseline is first of all, you need a good product, a good service, some kind of good business. If you don't have that, nothing else really matters. Assuming you have that, you need some kind of affiliate program, some kind of referral program, and you need to have that on your website. You need to make it clear, it's easy to remember, something that you can tell someone in 20 seconds. If you're offering a service-based business and you're actually doing B2B, which I know a lot of people here are not, that's something that you want to tell people at the end of every phone call. But that'll still come into play later, even if you're not doing B2B. The second thing is network with 3 new people every single day. It's the first thing I do every single morning. Reach out to 3 new people. You're not selling them. You're not pitching them. You're reaching out to them, letting them know, hey, I'd love to get on a networking call with you. And all the networking call is you hear about their business, you tell them about you, and you see if you can add value in any way. And if there's some way for you guys to work together, great, go for it. If not, just meet other people in the space. So you kind of have the foundation there. From there, then it just depends on what type of places you want to get on. Do you want to do virtual summits? Do you want to do podcasts? Do you want to go do speaking live? It's funny, 2 years ago, I was like, oh, I'm going to go travel the world and do speaking gigs. And I did that for 6 months. I was like, I hate this. I don't want to do this anymore. So I went back to more of the podcast route, but hire a VA and have them do research on what podcasts are in your industry. If you're, let's say that you sell like bar mugs, go find every podcast that talks about drinking and try to be on that podcast, try to network with the guests, try to pitch them, whatever it is, in a very, my approach for pitching is you reach out to them, you tell them what you want, and you don't bother them. You don't annoy them. You don't harass them. And even if they reject you, even if their response is like, you suck, why would I ever have you on your podcast, on my podcast, which is a response I've gotten plenty of times. I get rejected all the time. You stay even keeled. You don't go up, you don't go down. It's, hey, do you mind if I follow up with you in 6 months? Is there anything I can do to change your mind? I've had podcasts where it took me 2 years to get on, and I had to find every single free up client that also listened to the podcast and got a testimonial from all of them, and then sent it over to the podcast host, and then they let me on the podcast. So you can get a little bit creative with it. Next is content. Make sure you're putting content out to your actual audience. If you're an Amazon seller, probably doesn't make sense to put out content to other Amazon sellers, although I guess there's nothing wrong with it, but find your target audience, find that Facebook group of restaurant owners, bar owners, whatever it is that your product is intact with. And then lastly, micro influencers on Instagram, people with Facebook groups of your core audience, and connecting with them, seeing if you can do some kind of promotion, and focus on content swaps. No one ever wants it to be one way. If they're going to have you on your podcast, then you need to write a blog article for them, or vice versa, and have that go back, back and forth, and set it up so it's somewhat consistent and organized and easy to manage down the line. So that's my overall really quick version of partnerships.
Awesome. I love it. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch it again and take notes. Thank you for letting us behind the curtain there. So back to VA, since, that's what we're focusing on today. I know that, this might be basic for some, but, can you explain what a VA is and what kind of tasks they can do?
Yeah. So I like to kind of divide it into 3 levels of people. You got the followers, the doers, and the experts. So when I think of VA, I think of followers, that $5 to $10 an hour, non-US. They're there to follow your system, your processes, your SOPs, standard operating procedures. The doers are more the freelancers, like the graphic designers, writers, bookkeepers. And then the experts could be consultants, coaches, agencies. They're there to bring their own strategy, their own system. So for me, a VA is someone probably in that $5 to $10 an hour range that has years of experience. I tend not to hire like brand new VAs because they don't really know that they want to be in a VA yet. And then they're there to follow your system, your process. And that doesn't mean that they can't help make it better, that they can't become a team leader later or advance, but it's starting off, you know how to do it. You have a system and you're trying to get it off your plate.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that was, one of the main things that we missed when we hired our first VA is we hired them and then we're like, oh, okay, now what? Now what do we do? Like I've got this person working for me 20 hours a week or whatever it was, and what do I give them? Like, I didn't realize that you absolutely have to pair, systems, and you have to have a really step by step process to hand off. Otherwise, it's not going to work out, especially because a lot of times you're giving a VA a huge variety of tasks, right? It's not just like one task. It's it's like 5 or 6 different tasks, and or more. And if they don't have a step by step, they are probably not going to be successful with that. They'll get frustrated, and and possibly quit. So when do you think is the right time to hire a VA?
Yeah. So for me, there's 2 steps you kind of have to do before you jump into interviewing. The first step is figuring out your budget. And we have a VA calculator if you don't want to create your own that you can get on Outsource School, but figure out how much money your business makes and maybe factor it in like 3-month average or 6-month average, whatever it is, because times get crazy, as you can see right now, and you don't want to be 1 bad month away from having to fire everyone. Figure out what your revenue or your profit is for a period of time, and then how aggressive you want to be. When I first started selling on Amazon, I wanted to build an empire. I wanted to take Amazon down. I was hiring at like 50, 60% of my profit was going into hiring. Now that I'm a little bit older and have gone through multiple businesses, I tend to keep my in that 20 to 30 range, but you might be less. You might only want to invest 10%, and that's fine too. But figure out how much you make, how aggressive you want to be. And then from there, it's creating a list of all the tasks you do on a day-to-day, month-to-month, week-to-week basis, and prioritizing them from easiest to hardest. And what I like to do personally, I like to get rid of things I don't like doing because that's just kind of at the stage that I'm at. But you can figure out, hey, what do I have to do to get 5 hours a week back, 10 hours a week back, chip away at those easy tasks. And that's going to really help you kind of focus on what I call the 90-day rule, because most entrepreneurs, they just keep adding stuff to their plate. Every 90 days, you should be taking another thing off your plate. And that first month, you're kind of throwing stuff against the wall, seeing what's working, starting to create that SOP. By month 2, you're finalizing that SOP. Maybe you start interviewing someone. And then by month 3, you're training that VA and getting it off your plate by the end. And sometimes they'll take 60 days. Sometimes it takes 120, but a good rule of thumb is that 90 days.
Yeah, that's great advice. So on that same kind of note, what kind of tasks do you think are some of the first tasks that you could offload to a VA?
Bookkeeping. So with my dropshipping Amazon business, and I wasn't very good at QuickBooks, which is another reason to take off bookkeeping. Most entrepreneurs are not good at QuickBooks. But I used to get these credit card statements because my manufacturers would have my credit card and they would all just randomly charge my credit card whenever they got an order. And I would sit there with Connor and I would read off a number and he would put it into his computer and we would just do that for hours and hours and hours. Well, not only did we spend hours and hours and hours, but when we were done, it wasn't correct to begin with. So we just had to redo it. And most entrepreneurs, one way or another, end up doing that with their bookkeeping anyway. So hiring a bookkeeper to start your business is the smart thing to do. It was our second hire at FreeUp. It was our first hire at Outsource School. Hire bookkeepers. Next is anything that gets you out of like email support, or it could be your own inbox. That tends to be my second hire. Third doesn't really apply to Amazon sellers as much, is social media. Just I'm a big proponent of having consistent content out there. And then it kind of comes down to the day-to-day operations of your business. What is that thing that you are not good at that is outside of your core competency? If you're great at sourcing, don't hire a sourcer right away. Focus on sourcing as much as possible. If you write the best Amazon listings, hire someone for sourcing. So figure out what you're really good at and what is that stuff that is just very repetitive that you can take off your plate.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one thing that I'm curious about, and I've heard this a lot, and I've yet to do this because I don't know quite how to approach this. So I'm interested to hear for, giving access to your inbox. Like there's all kinds of stuff that comes to my inbox that I'm not necessarily wanting to trust, a VA that I just hired to get into that information. How do you kind of get through that? Do you create like a separate mailbox for them and just forward stuff, or kind of how do you handle that situation?
Yeah, I mean, you can do that. I've seen clients that'll set up 2 emails and they set up automatic forwarding, and then they set up rules so that certain emails don't get forwarded. I personally don't do that. At FreeUp, I gave people access to my inbox. It's one of those trust factor things. I mean, the average VA cares a lot more about keeping a job with you and getting more clients, especially if you get them on a platform like FreeUp that is going to kick them off if they do anything crazy, than they do about just like stealing your information or getting access to your inbox, which they probably won't even know what to do with that information afterwards. So for me, I like to build up that trust. Do I just give them access to my inbox on day one? Maybe not. Build up that relationship. But I mean, you can have them sign all the NDAs in the world and you're not going to chase them across the Philippines over a piece of paper. So it really comes down to that trust factor.
Awesome. So I guess we have somebody watching live who just got accepted to FreeUp, and they're wondering if you have any tips for them to land their first client.
Yes, I do. Make your intro email short and very specific to the actual job that you are applying to, whatever that job posting is. Don't just send a generic thing. You can have a generic intro like, hi, my name is X, I'm from blah, 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 whatever. But then after that, dive right into that specific job posting. If that posting is Amazon, don't talk about your social media skills. Keep it very focused on Amazon.
Yeah, that's a great tip. What is the best way to interview potential VAs and make sure that you get the best candidate and the one that is, targeted, like you said, closely to the skills that you need?
Yeah, so we call it our CARE method, which essentially the E stands for experience, the A stands for attitude, R is for red flags, and C is for communication. So for us, yes, the experience is important, but the attitude is the biggest thing. If you hire someone with a bad attitude, it's very, very tough to get that attitude to change. So what I recommend doing is don't do a Zoom like this. Don't do a video like this. It's funny, when we sold the Hoth, the FreeUp, the first thing they tried to do was do like a big video chat with all the VAs in the Philippines. I was like, great idea, not going to work. You have different power issues, internet issues, things get lost, things zone out. So do it via chat. Have a conversation with someone on Slack, on Skype, go through it. We provide you in the course with interview questions that you can ask and what you're looking for. But you want to look for someone who has a great attitude, who isn't just focused on money, who has passion in getting better and learning and wanting to be part of something bigger, but that also responds quickly and clearly, that you can understand what they're saying, that if you ask them 4 questions, they respond to all 4. They don't only just answer 2 of them, and you're moving at a good pace. Because if you're interviewing someone and they're going slow, they're not responding for 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, could be distractions, could be internet issues, could be anything, but that's a huge red flag. So that's how we go about it.
Awesome. And on that note, you mentioned a few tools that you use, but that was my next question anyway. What tools are you using to manage your VAs, and what tools get you the most productivity? I know Slack's one of our favorites.
It's funny. So I used Skype for all 4 years of FreeUp. And then when I sold FreeUp, I opened up a Slack account and I'm like, why have I been using Skype for the past 4 years?
That's the same. We just switched over like 3-ish months ago, and same exact thing. Yeah. I now know what the hype was about.
Right. Slack's incredible. Yeah, I use Trello for project management. Super easy, free. I use Jira for any type of developers. If you use developers, I strongly recommend learning how to use Jira. We use Viber and WhatsApp for emergencies. So that's a big thing people miss, is they have their VA and then they have only one way of contacting the VA, or maybe 2, maybe you have email and Slack. You got to have that third way. You got to have a Viber. You have to have their phone number, stuff like that. At the same time, you don't want to just be Vibering someone randomly and when it's not important, when they're not working, but you should have that backup system there. And yeah, I mean, the rest can be done via Google Docs. I know we're coming out with some new software that we think is going to complement it very well that I can't share, but for the most part, we keep it simple. We keep it basic. We keep it free. And I mean, we had 35 VAs all managed through Skype at the time. Now we use Slack and Trello, Jira, and Google Docs.
Awesome.
And Nathan,
So,
I have a question.
Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about actually choosing the right hire. So you said hire a bookkeeper first, which I wish I would have done that. I had to learn that the hard way in the end. But my question for you is, even if they're doing pretty well in the interview, how do you give them that first pass to ensure, how do you choose the best candidate, first of all? And then how do you really ensure that you're picking the right one for the job?
Yeah. So there's 4 steps of hiring, right? You got the interviewing, you got the onboarding, you got the training, and you got the managing. So the goal of each step is a little bit different. The goal of interviewing is to figure out who has the best attitude, who has the best background. Yes, they could be lying about that, but I mean, I've had really good interviews that ended up being great. I've had really good interviews where, you get them to do the work and it's so, even though they had a great attitude or whatever it was. So different goals. During the interview, you want to make sure they have a good attitude, that they're responding quickly, they have a background that you like. During the onboarding, you want to get on the same page with expectations. We call it our SICK method. So schedule, issues, communication, culture. So we go through, hey, what's your schedule going to be? What's expected there? How do you handle computer issues, power issues, internet issues? Would you have a backup plan, stuff like that? So we're on the same page. We go through communication. So I mentioned email, Slack, Viber, how we're going to use each channel, what's expected of you when you're working, and then culture, whether they're a culture fit, what they have the same values, and will get along with the team. So that's on the same page with expectations. And then the actual work that comes during the training, where we call it our SSS method: study, sample, show. So the whole point of that is you can give someone your SOP, and for the first X amount of time for FreeUp, we had a 50-page SOP for customer service. We would give them an entire week just to read it, study it, ask questions. And then at the end of the week, we would test them. And if they get 80% of it, great. I'll get them that last 20%. No big deal. If they get 30% of it, I'm going to value my time. I'm going to pay them for their time because I believe in that, and I'm going to move on. So each part has a different method to it. You're not going to know 100% by the time you're done interviewing that the person's not pulling a fast one on you, but you'll have a pretty good idea of their attitude and of their communication. And from my experience, the people that have a great attitude and great communication tend to be much more honest about what they can and cannot do. And maybe 8 out of 10 are honest about it. And then you'll weed out that last 2 out of 10 by doing the study, sample, show method.
Awesome. I love that there's a process behind all that. What should you be focused on as the business owner? Like once you start passing these tasks off, we kind of talked about a little bit, but what should you be focusing on as the business owner?
For me, I want to spend the majority of my time focused on sales, marketing, expansion, and then any type of like management setup decision. So like right now I'm working with Outsource School with Connor and Nate McAllister. I think you guys know Nate. And so we're meeting, we're talking about, hey, what's the strategy here? What's the strategy here? How do we want to implement this? So that's part of our time, although we don't spend all of our time meeting. And then the rest of the time is the sales, the marketing, the expansion. As you get bigger, you can hire people to come in and replace different parts of that. And the example I always give is FreeUp. Everyone kind of knew me as the face of FreeUp, right? And you can't sell a business if you're the face of the company. But the key is I didn't do any of the day-to-day operations of FreeUp. The VAs did all of that. I would manage and meet with Connor and make decisions and relay them down. But when the Hoth came in and bought us, it's very easy to replace a marketing person or a lead generation person or a brand person. You can come in with a bigger, better marketing strategy, more money, different people. All of that's interchangeable. So that's what you should be focused on as an entrepreneur. And then eventually those are some of the last things that you do outsource, you do hire for.
Awesome. So, how do VAs help, some examples of how a VA would help an Amazon business or other types of small businesses, especially now that so many people are working from home?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that go on in an Amazon business, and Amazon's one of those things that it's running 24/7. And if you want to be like me, when the first few years at Amazon, where I was awake 24/7 running this business, you could do that. But I recommend hiring VAs to, one, work at the times that you're not working, whether it's customer service, checking on your account. Two, doing a lot of the work that just takes up time, whether it's contacting seller support, fixing shipments, whatever that stuff is. And then more of the day-to-day operations that are outside of your business or outside of the actual Amazon platform, whether it's sourcing products or different lead generation. I talked to you about landing micro influencers and stuff on the marketing side. All of that comes into place. So they're really there to kind of speed you ahead. If you take one system, let's say you have 100% of the system, and the last part of that is actually buying from the manufacturer, use the VA to get 50, 60, 70, 80% done with that. So then you can take it home on that last 20%. And then when you find that rockstar VA that can do all of it, then teach them to do a little bit more and push that limit and see if you can get it all the way.
Awesome. I love that. So this is a great question. And this is the one that you passed to me. So thank you for giving me a cheat sheet, but this is an awesome one. Why hire from the Philippines? I know that I've hired from all over the world. And I'm curious to see why you think the Philippines is the place to go.
Yeah, and I've hired from all over the world too, and I also continue to work with some people outside the Philippines. I have this graphic designer who in India who's fantastic. So it's not all about where you live or where you're from, but from my experience, they speak English at a very high level. They learn English in school. They tend to be more tech savvy, computer savvy as a whole. They tend to follow the same media, and what I mean by that is they listen to the same music, they watch the same TV shows, they play the same video games, which might seem silly, but when you're, especially if you're an Amazon seller and you're selling US products, having someone working for you that actually understands the product and understands the culture goes a long way. The other thing is just their core values. And yes, there's a religious aspect of that as well, but overall, they're all about family. They're all about working together. They're all about the greater good, which when you get to the management part, which we talked about in the course, you want to get them to buy in. You want to get them to build a family inside your business. And we had situations where we had outside people trying to poach our VAs from our internal team in free up. They'd offer them more money, whatever it was, but they didn't want to leave the family. So there's certain values in there that you really want in a VA that go a long way. And I've also just built a relationship with great people in the Philippines, and that's kind of expanded that as well.
That actually leads me to another great question. So how do you build the relationship with these VAs? Are you doing any type of like contests or like because one of the things you miss with a virtual employee is you don't have the face-to-face kind of fun and banter and water cooler talk and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So how do you kind of foster that that kind of I guess morale, like, how to have fun while still getting work done.
So we call it our BARF method, which is a funny acronym. I wish it spelled something different, but it's getting them to buy in, showing appreciation, building a relationship, and building that family culture. And we give people cheat sheets. And one of the big ones that I'll give you now, we have a Monday morning meeting with all our VAs. We did it free up. And for the first 5 minutes of the meeting, everyone's just sharing one picture from their weekend. And people will comment it, people ask questions, it builds camaraderie. We get to share our pictures, Connor and I, crazy stuff that we did. And that's just one thing that takes up 5 minutes of your week that gets everyone in the positive mindset before they're going. They're going to like it. They're going to tell their other VAs, oh, there's this awesome thing that this company does. It's kind of exclusive to them. And boom, one step closer to building that relationship. And building a relationship is not something you just like, you do one day, you're like, okay, I have a relationship with this VA going forward. We give people actual conversation starters that don't take up much time that you can have every single week. You can do it in meetings, you can do it one-on-one, and you can do it at the end of the week. Hey, have a good weekend, by the way, XYZ. And from there, if you're just every single week doing one or two things, that's going to build that relationship over time.
Awesome. I love that. Where do you see the freelance gig economy heading in the next few years? I know that it seems to be evolving quickly. I know that you mentioned Upwork at one point. I used to love Upwork. Now I barely use them because they put all these like paywalls up and the quality of the freelancers actually seems to have gone down. I would love to hear where you think that market is headed.
Yeah, I think small businesses over the past 5 to 10 years have really shifted towards the VA, towards a remote workspace. I think that now we're going to see some of those enterprise, bigger level clients go more and more towards that remote space. I don't know if it's the Corona thing, but I think we're kind of headed in that direction anyway, where more people are just figuring out the pluses. There's just a lot of plus from the client side, but there's also pluses from the freelancer, from the VA side, where they get to have multiple clients. They get to work from home. They don't have to drive to work, whatever it is. So I think everything's slowly going in that direction. Do I think we're going to get to like a remote world where everyone's working from home? Probably not. But I think that the tendency is definitely more and more towards remote.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because, I've run many businesses and I've only had a physical office once, which I got rid of last October when we moved, and the office was just myself. So our team's completely virtual all around the world. So it's fun to balance all those time zones and things like that. But I don't know if I could ever do the big office building, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are on that same page. They don't want to have to go to a giant, corporate building every day to work. Some people might want that, but I know that I don't. So it's interesting. Is that something you would ever want to do, Nate? Like grow a company big enough to where you have to go to an office building every day, or are you set on kind of the free free the free way of working, I guess.
So I actually did that for my Amazon business. We were remote the first like 3 or 4 years, and then we got an office and we were like, all right, like this is gonna be awesome. We're gonna be more productive. We actually paid to relocate a bunch of remote people in the US to go along with the VAs. And it was probably one of the worst business decisions I ever made. I added overhead to a business that didn't need it. We were a drop shipping business. We had no reason to have an office. And there's all this drama in the office that you just don't have when you're dealing with remote. And I think I'm personally just better at managing remote people. But I remember having conversations with people like, oh, the person next to me smells, like stuff like that I just don't have like time to deal with as a business owner. And then Connor and I, on a personal level, we felt like we had created a 9 to 5 job for ourselves that we had to like drive into every day, which I think now we're a little bit more mature and we're like, all right, we're the owners. We don't actually have to drive in every day, but there was a certain obligation of who's going to be handling it. And we were also younger. We were 24, 23. So getting people that were a lot older than us to work when we're not there as business owners, I think was a little bit more of a challenge too. So for all those reasons, I think Connor and I, unless he changes his mind, we are pretty set on doing the remote thing going forward.
Yeah. So something else I just thought of too that's interesting is, so you're kind of the face of the company for FreeUp, and it sounds like you're kind of doing the same thing for the new endeavor. So is Connor just the guy kind of behind the scenes? Is he more of the operator?
He is. I actually got him to teach a bunch of parts of the course. So the way that we did it at FreeUp, it was he did the interviewing and I did the onboarding. And then he did certain other stuff after that too. So I had him do the interview section because he's one of the best VA interviewers I've ever met. And he actually has screen shares of people of him interviewing real VAs. We put in a request to FreeUp, got 4 random VAs, interviewed them. You get to watch us do it and his thoughts behind it, which is awesome. But before I had him do that, I had him record like a bunch of smaller videos and get him on camera for the first time in 4 years, which was a little bit of fun. But he crushed it after that. But yeah, I always believe in hiring people that have the same values, the same beliefs. I mean, Connor and I were all about treating people well, respect about, hey, if we make a mistake, we're going to make it right every single time. Not being all about the money at all times, about growing something big and taking care of the people like we did at FreeUp and all of that. So same values, completely different personalities and skill sets. I'm much more of high energy, rah. He's much more chill, calm, cool, collective. He's much more technical. He's a much better writer than me. So we complement each other very well.
That's awesome. So I guess we have another question from the live. How does health insurance work, and is it mandatory to provide your Filipino VA? I think that's where they're directing this, health insurance.
Filipino VA, it is not mandatory for you to provide health insurance for. If you get a VA in the US, you should consult your local attorneys, or it depends on what state you are, and also what country you are. But yeah, for the Filipino VAs, we never provided health insurance, obviously subject to change. But I mean, they're technically filing a W-8, so they're running a business in their own country that you're hiring them for. So that's not something that you're responsible for.
Yeah. So, how do you keep longtime employees engaged and producing? Have you done things like bonuses, contests? Kind of, I'm interested in hearing, what kind, besides building a family and making them feel at home and all of that good stuff. Are there any ways to, get your employees producing and then give them some type of bonus or thank you for doing a good job?
Yeah, so we have a whole section in the course on raises and bonuses because you're right, they are so important. The buying in and all that is great, but the bonus and the raises have to go along with it. So the key that I'll give for bonuses is a lot of people, they're obsessed with that 13th month that people do in the Philippines, where they get 1 month bonus at the end of the year. So if they make $500 a month, that last month of December, they would make $1,000. So they get December's payment plus an additional one. That's great and all, not how we did it. So we would take whatever the 13th month was, and sometimes it'd be a little bit more, sometimes it'd be a little bit less, but we would divide it out over the course of a year. So we would give either quarterly or half year bonuses. And what that allows you to do is keep them more motivated, keep them more engaged, use those bonuses as an opportunity to give feedback and challenge them and be like, hey, I show appreciation. Thank you so much for doing all this work. Here's the bonus. Now let's talk about the future. Let's talk about the business and get them to buy in, get them excited, get them motivated for their next bonus coming up next quarter or next half year, instead of having to wait till the end of the year. So that's just one small tip that you can implement that I think will make a large difference when you're working with VAs.
Awesome. So this is a question that I get a lot, actually, from people who are just starting to get into the VA world or have been in it and not been successful. Is they have a really hard time, tracking output and work performance. So in other words, they're like, oh, I hired this person for 40 hours a week. I just don't feel like I'm getting, as much output or as much done as I think I should for that amount of time. Um, how can you, set up, expectations to be in line with how long something actually takes, because it might take you and I an hour to do, but it might take the VA 2 hours because they're not as much of an expert in that subject matter. So any tips on how to judge that productivity?
Yeah, so my personal opinion is to stay away from all the screen capture software and all that. If you want to crush someone's soul and crush their morale, watch over their shoulder 40 hours a week. That'll do that pretty quick. But for me, I try to break that down a lot further. So if I think someone's working 40 hours a week and they're not, I'm going to say, okay, give me a breakdown of what you're doing for each of those hours. And then if there's a part of it, hey, I'm spending 10 hours here, let's break it down further. What are you doing here? Show me what's taking the longest. And what I found 4 years of dealing with FreeUp and talking to FreeUp clients, it's usually like one or two things that they're hung up on, or they're doing it wrong, or you just have a faster way of doing it that you didn't teach them how to do and you assume that they knew how to do it. So if you just keep going deeper and deeper, okay, you spent 5 hours here, break that down further. Okay, in this hour, like show me what you did, or even send me a recording of you working for 30 minutes so that I can see how you do it. And then I can give you some tips on how to do it faster. To me, that's how I always go about not just dealing with that problem, but really any problem in general. You got to get the overall information and break it down further and further and further until you figure out exactly what part of it is broken.
Awesome. That's great feedback. So this is something I actually have trouble with sometimes is, how do you plan? Because to not only does it take, time to build all these systems and stuff, but it also takes a lot of time to manage the VAs. So like, do you have any systems, like how do you plan, each week for the VA in terms of like what they're doing, if they're doing, tasks that aren't the same every single week? And then what about things that, randomly pop up like, hey, I need this done, which is not a normal thing you're doing, you normally do, how do you kind of handle and manage those?
Yeah. So a bunch of thoughts here. First of all, we have a meeting with everyone at the beginning of the week, get them on the same page. And then each team has a meeting every single week. And then we have a one-on-one meeting every quarter. So we're on the same page with everyone. From there, we divide it up between day-to-day tasks, short-term projects, and long-term projects. So day-to-day, hey, XYZ, this needs to get done every single time. And then the short-term projects, we give them the time frame that needs to get done by. In addition to that, and this is the part that everyone messes up, we let them know what tasks are more important than other tasks. If you only have X amount of time to work on something, and there's going to be some times where you run out of times, especially because all of us entrepreneurs just constantly throw stuff at VAs that come up out of the blue, you need to let them know, hey, every time that I give you this task, it immediately jumps to highest priority, or hey, this task needs to be done by noon every day. And communication is key. Listen, if I give you too much stuff and all the important stuff can't get done by when it needs to get done, don't just try to do it and fail and then come to me and say, hey, sorry, I didn't get to it. Communicate up front. Hey, Nate, it's too much. I won't be able to do it. What do you want to do here? Do you want me to push the deadline back? Do you want to assign it to someone else? Like that communication flow you have to establish very early on.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think that's excellent advice. The only other thing I'm curious about, though, is I know that a lot of Filipino VAs and just Filipino workers in general, because of their culture, they kind of have a hard time being, and it's not honest, but like upfront and
Right.
blunt, right? So do you have any ways that you can, any tips to navigate that? Because, you could tell a Filipino VA like, hey, make sure you tell me this if you fail at this job, but then they like are almost scared to tell you, or there's that like kind of cultural thing where it's almost like losing face. How do you convey that that's not the case at all? We're a team, we're working together and supporting each other. Any tips there?
Yeah, so that's why the onboarding is so important. And we get them on the same page up front that, hey, we're not expecting you to be a robot. We're expecting you to actually communicate and let us know when something's wrong. And by the time they go through an interview and an onboarding, interview takes 20 to 40 minutes, onboarding takes 10 to 30 minutes, maybe 15 to 30 minutes. You're going to know whether they're just a yes person. If you're just answering a lot or asking questions and you're just getting one word responses or telling you what you want to hear, they're not diving deep, they're not letting you know what they're like personally, that right there is a red flag. And if you set the expectation, hey, I expect you to, let's say, communicate when you can't hit a deadline, like we talked about before, the second you get to that in the training part and they don't do that, you're going to pause work. You're going to take a step back. You're going to say, hey, we talked about this during the expectation. What part can I clarify here? How do we get on the same page? And only if you're on the same page do you move forward. So it's kind of like every single part of the 4-part process of hiring has a backup part at a different section, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we have another question from somebody who's watching live. What is your worst hiring experience, and what did you learn from that experience? I bet you've got some good ones.
Yeah. So my worst hiring experience, I hired someone and I trained him for 6 months to manage my entire Amazon business. And this was before Amazon software too. So there was a lot of manual stuff like adjusting prices and stuff like that. So 6 months of training him, like I'm sleeping better at night. Everything's good. My business is on autopilot. And I go on vacation and I go to Myrtle Beach, and I'll never go back to Myrtle Beach. I'm scarred for life. But I got a call from him telling me that he quit on me. So 6 months of training just down the drain. On that same day, I actually got a call that my biggest manufacturer was dropping me. And that same day, I got another call telling me that my identity had been stolen and someone had filed a $40,000 tax return from the government. The government paid them $40,000 in my name, and I was going to have to deal with that when I got back. So I kind of went from like this ultimate high as like, I'm this 21-year-old entrepreneur crushing Amazon. No one can touch me, to let's just start this thing all over again with a new manufacturer and a new hire and all that. But learned a very valuable lesson about diversifying my hiring. And now every business I run is teams. There's a customer service team, there's a billing team, there's a social media team. And if someone quits from that team, I just replace that system, that process, that person, instead of having to replace someone who just knows the entire business. And a lot of entrepreneurs do that because hiring's hard. So you make some bad hires and you finally find someone you like, you find someone you trust, and you just load that person up with everything. And they don't realize how risky that really makes your business going forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. That actually reminds me, it's not quite that bad, but I've had some similar experiences to that. But the one that resonates the most, or reminds me the most of your experiences, I was in Hawaii visiting my dad, and same kind of thing. Awesome, having a great time. And then we found out that the new terms of service where you couldn't exchange discounts for reviews, right? Because we had a review site really early on in the day.
Right.
And it was, so our 6-figure software as a service went to zero pretty much in one day.
Wow.
We were able to kind of iterate on it, but that was brutal, but not nearly as bad as losing the app business in one day. That was my worst one. But that being said, you just have to know that failure comes along with being an entrepreneur, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, I always say that as an entrepreneur at the beginning, you kind of just get sucked into the highs and the lows, right? You're like on top of the world. You're like, oh, my life's over. And you just like keep bouncing up. And then as you get deeper and deeper into being an entrepreneur, you kind of get numb and you're kind of just like this. If you're like crushing it, you're like, all right, we got to keep going, got to keep moving forward. Something's going to change. And if something goes wrong, you're like, all right, like this is a problem. We just need to solve it. And you kind of change your mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Mindset is so huge. I think that's one of the biggest things that people miss when they're starting and running their businesses, right? Is just getting your mind straight. And, that's where the learning comes into play, right? Like courses and podcasts and, YouTube, pretty much anywhere where you can get that inspiration, that, how to get your mind straight. There's so many great resources out there. One last question before we wrap this up. And this is my least favorite question, but when do you think it's time to fire your current VA? What are some signs that you need to move on?
Yeah. So, signs could be anything. It could be mistake prone. It could be attitude, stuff like that. And we actually provide you with a list of like all the common mistakes and how important they are and how least important they are. And to me, it's all communication. Someone could be having, like, I had a VA who, she was pregnant. She had a lot of issues with her pregnancy, but she just communicated the entire time. She kept us up to date. She let us know. And that was key, versus someone who's sick for a week and they don't communicate at all. Like, I'd much rather have the second person who's or the first person who's communicating. So communication's key. For me, you have to really value 3 different things. You have to value, like, what type of player are they? Are they an A player, a B player, or a C player when it comes to their working? Are they someone who's always crushing it? They're smart. They pick stuff up fast, because you're going to give them a little bit more leeway. That's just the way the world is. If someone's a C player who, they do what they're told, but they're not really adding anything to the table, they work at an okay speed, whatever it is, and they're also causing other issues, probably not giving that person as much of a leash. So that's the first thing. Second is how much time you've invested into someone. If you've invested 3 days into someone and they're causing all these issues, probably going to part ways pretty quick. If you've invested a year into someone, 2 years, you probably want to dive a little bit deeper and see if you can figure it out and turn it around. And then the last thing is, how will it affect your team? And I would never just keep someone around who fails everything else, but the team likes them. But you need to know, prepare yourself for what's worst case scenario. If I do let this person go, what impact is this going to have on my team? And you need to be thinking about that up front, not right when you're about to fire them. So all three factors, and we have a whole section about this in the course, you have to consider before you start making any moves.
Awesome.
That is great, Nate. So I have a question about the course. There are so many great courses out there, and I'm sure that all the information that you've given us today, I'm sure our listeners are just like, wow, it's awesome. I want to know more about this course. People are nervous about hiring for the first time, but they may not want to devote all of the time to a full course, So tell us a little bit more about the course format, how many modules there are, what we can expect. Is it flexible? How should we expect and why? How are we going to get this information that's going to make it easier for us to expand our businesses, grow our businesses, and hire?
Yeah. So here's the cool thing. The course is for all different levels of people. So there might be people who have never heard of a VA before watching this video, or they've never hired a VA before. There might be people who have hired VAs, but they've struggled with them. Or there might be people that have hired VAs, had some success, but they want to take it to the next level. So the people that have never done it before, they should probably take the entire course. The entire course is about 9 hours long, but there's certain parts of it that you don't need to necessarily watch if you don't want to. So we've got, for example, we interviewed 4 different VAs. You might not need to watch all 4 VA interviews. I mean, you might be able to watch one of them and then take the cheat sheet and go do it. For the people that have done the VA thing before and they understand what a VA is, they can probably skip the first few videos that talk about hiring from the Philippines and what a VA is, some of the basic stuff, and dive right into it. And they might not be ready for more of the advanced stuff, who the first people can skip, who is building team leaders and assistant team leaders. So that might cut time off the end there too. And then the people that are more advanced might be skipped to more of the management stuff. So it kind of has all 3 parts. But the cool thing is, yes, you can take the entire course, learn it, and then go hire VAs. But it's also designed for you to actually go through hiring a VA as you take the course. Watch the interview section, interview your VA. Watch the onboarding section, onboard them, and go with us. And we're providing support along the way. So if a VA says something during the interview that you're like, ooh, I think this is a red flag, let me get Nate's opinion on it, you can shoot us an email, shoot us a message, and we'll let you know. So we can actually help you along the way, hire really good VAs and scale your business.
I love how flexible that is. That's really great. And, it sounds like you have access to this material for a long time.
Yeah. And anyone so we're calling this Cracking the VA Code 1.0. We're just doing that just in case we add tweaks and stuff in the future. But if we release 2.0, 3.0 to 5.0, you still get free access to everything in the course and all the new stuff that we added to it.
Very cool. So I know that right now you have a really special deal on your course. You're in like a pre-launch special pricing time. Did you want to tell everybody about that and how they can take advantage of that deal?
Yeah. So the normal course is going to be $997 going forward. We're going to launch additional courses that'll be both more and less. But for this week only, we're going to have it up for $497. Again, anyone who buys it will get access to all future versions. We're doing this to get some people going in the course so we can listen to feedback and continue to tweak it over time. So that till Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern time is going to be available at $497, and then it'll be $997 going forward.
Awesome. Okay. Where can they go to get it?
Yeah, you guys might have a link below for it, but if you go to Outsource School on the website, right there at the top, you can click the button to buy the course. And if anyone has any questions, leave a comment or shoot me a PM, but just outsourceschool.com. We didn't add an extra E or anything like we did with Free Up.
Made it easier this time, right?
Yeah, we learned that lesson.
Yeah. The domain is so important, right? Well, Nate, thank you so much for coming on. Every time we get you on, I learn something new, which is great. That's one of the great things about doing this podcast, right? Is I get to re-educate myself on a lot of these things and talk to the experts in their field and be able to pick their brain about stuff, not only that our audience will like, but like I said, I get to be selfish sometimes and ask, things like your partnership, ideas. So thanks for that. Anything else that you want to mention? I always like to ask this question. I know it's kind of weird, but just to see where people are currently, like any podcasts or books or things that you're watching, listening to, reading that are having a big impact on what you're currently doing.
So I just finished the book Hatching Twitter, which I think is fascinating because I'm incredibly lucky that I've worked with Connor for 10 years now, but it kind of shows you the uglier side of what happens when you don't get along with your business partners and the people that you're working with. And Twitter is obviously a huge success story, but there's a lot of fighting behind the scenes, a lot of power struggles and stabbing people in the back. So definitely a book I recommend if you want a different perspective.
It's interesting. I'll have to add it to my list, to the list of many that I have. I'm currently reading The One Thing. I've had it for a long time, but I never cracked it. But I've realized that that's definitely something that I need to concentrate on because I've got the shiny object syndrome hardcore, and so that's one of the things I'm constantly trying to work on is trying to get more focused. So, Amy, anything new that you've been reading or watching that you've enjoyed?
Oh man, we've been getting into travel hacking a lot lately. We all run a lot of money through our businesses, so we've been kind of nerding out over that. And traveling is one of that's our Lamborghini, right? Nathan says he has, he likes to travel too. So we've been trying to listen to a lot of podcasts and stuff about that. I've also been learning a lot more about venture capital and becoming a venture capitalist. I'm reading a lot of books about that. Just trying to expand on my asset category. So
love it.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching live, listening on the podcast afterwards. As usual, we really, really thank you guys for doing so. I love logging into our podcast stats. It's kind of like our Amazon profit number, right? Like every month that number goes up. We're getting more and more listeners. We're getting more and more emails of, from people saying how much we've helped them, how they've been able to quit their day jobs, all that stuff. That gives us that's like our power up, right? Video game analogy. Whenever we get that, it really re-energizes us and makes us know why we're doing this. And it's definitely our why in terms of this podcast, getting you guys to the next level, helping you any way we can. Make sure that you subscribe, tell people about the podcast. If we've helped you out, we really, really appreciate that. Leave a review, even if it's a crummy one. It gives us feedback in terms of, what we need to work on. And yeah, besides that, thank you guys so much for watching. And if you haven't joined us live before, you can do so, ask questions. We usually, end at the end, we stop and stop the recording and we just kind of chat with the guests for a little, for a little while. So you get some of the behind the scenes. If you guys want to do that, you can check that out at sellerseo.com/SRT. And soon we're going to have everything on the sellerroundtable.com website, where that's going to be the one place you go to for everything. So we're looking forward to that. We will be announcing that shortly. If you haven't gone there, you can go there to subscribe and get the video of the episodes, all that other fun stuff. So thank you guys. And we will see you next time on Seller Roundtable.
Bye.
All right. Recording's done. And all you guys on the live stream, thanks for joining us. We will see you guys next time. Usually 1 p.m. Pacific, unless we're doing an extra or, a one-on-one interview or a quick tip episode, things like that. We just kind of post those when we can. And we'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining us.